Hey, this is Ralph for the Prineville Chess Club. I'm going to play a 10-0 rapid game. Find an opponent, which usually happens pretty fast at the 10-0 time control. I'm white. I'm going to start with e4. Develop. Control the center. I'm going to play the Italian game, bringing the bishop out to c4. Now, from my brief amount of study with this opening, best move is bishop c3 with the plan of threatening that bishop. And I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, so they're moving back. I'm going to go ahead and push my h-pawn just to prevent a pin. Although there could be some potential to push the b-pawn and the a-pawn and really start to threaten that b6 bishop, their dark squared bishop. Okay, knight is out. It's attacking this pawn, which is undefended, so I need to support that. And I can support it directly with a knight move, or I can pin their knight. So they're not going to want to take the pin because they would lose the queen. They're pushing my knight away. Now I have to wonder, if I back up, will they push again, forcing my bishop to back up to g3, and then they could take that pawn. I'm going to go ahead and take. Okay, I'm going to pin their knight. I still have plenty of defense on this d4 pawn, but now I'm thinking about pushing that d4 pawn. Well, looks like we're going to trade a little bit. Okay, so they've broken the pin by moving, by castling. I am going to go ahead and take that knight. That's going to double up their pawns, give them a weaker pawn structure. Now, granted, they do have the pawn pair, or I'm sorry, the bishop pair, which is fantastic for black. I'm going to go ahead and get castled. Okay, they're starting an early attack here. I am going to take with my queen, offer a trade of queens. Ooh. Okay, so they're not going for that. Now, I do have a material advantage, but I do have a weakness, right? Bishop is threatening my h3 pawn, which I can't take back. So I'm going to move my king up to help defend. I need to get developed. Now, since I have an advantage right now, I'm up the exchange. I've got two knights. They only have one bishop. I do need to start considering trading down. I've got good central control, completely developed. Rooks are connected. It's time to start planning how are you going to attack your opponent, if you haven't already. I'm going to move down to a dark square with plans of bringing some rooks out, perhaps doing a rook lift, doubling up my rooks. And this will give my queen an opportunity maybe to get in between this triple stack. Now, I made that move pretty quick, and I'm relatively happy I did, but I need to keep an eye. I might have an opportunity with this knight move to d5 going after this pawn. When you or your opponent have doubled pawns, the back pawn is generally the weakest. So I think I can do that now. I expect them to push, but then I can move my knight to b6 and go after that bishop. Now I could go here, attack a rook. Actually, that would be a fork. I could potentially, I'd be able to grab that pawn. Now, if I do that and I grab that pawn, will my rook be trapped? It may be. Yeah, so knight c7, rook c8. I can take the pawn. Yeah, and I think my knight would get stuck over there, so they'd ultimately be able to get that knight. So not worth doing. All right, let's go after that bishop. I can double up my rook underneath my queen. Target this pawn. And my opponent abandoned the game. So I certainly don't think they were losing, but you know, I sometimes have played at work, so maybe they got called away. I bet the game was pretty close. I'm gonna go ahead and hit the game review. And yeah, actually, game was pretty even. I did white start to take an advantage. Yeah, I was up 3 in material. So um, yeah, I shouldn't have said pretty even because I knew I had a 2-point advantage going in to that end game. Whenever the game is short like this, yeah, it's nice to have a 91% accuracy, but it's easier. I shouldn't say relatively. It's a little bit easier to make accurate moves when you have the most time on your clock, and it's the beginning of the game. Openings is generally what we, including me, probably study the most, and that might be a detrimental skill or a skill to develop too much or to spend too much time on. What a lot of the pros say is spend more times on tactics, which show up in the middle game, and that's something I need to do better at is practice tactics. I do feel like I practice at least 20, 30, 40 minutes a day for chess, but almost all of my practice focuses on openings. And I need to start changing that. And that's kind of my plan for the summer. So the summer of tactics training. So 91% accuracy, no blunders, no misses. I did make a mistake, and since the game is relatively short, should be easy to find that and figure out what I could have done better. So I'm going to jump over to the analysis board, and I'm going to run through just hitting the arrows on my keyboard. I'm keeping my eye on the chessboard and the evaluation bar, and only later on will I let my eyes go over to the engine lines off to the right. So I've got some book openings here. Okay. Now, remember this icon is an inaccuracy, not a mistake. But I didn't think that was going to be the best move, even though I made it anyway. I just wanted to avoid that pin. So if I was going back in time to redo this, instead of worrying about that particular move, I might start to see the value, since this bishop is stuck up here, of maybe pushing this pawn, then this pawn, and then this would give me an opportunity to trap that bishop up there. Now, if I were to push, do a pawn b4 move, so b4, knight can't take, and it does give them something to consider. They can obviously pin, but I can ignore that pin and then do a4. Now they really have to contend with this because that bishop is going to get trapped and going to get lost soon. So they won't have time to trade over here. So they'd have to make perhaps room by pushing their a pawn to a6, giving their bishop some escape. I could push forward, the bishop would go back. I could push forward again, and their knight would have to move backward as well to an unpleasant square. So I bet b4 is probably the better move. Let's see what the engine says. It doesn't say any of that stuff. So b4, I think, can be a good line, but they are recommending d takes e5. So opening up in the center right away. So d takes e5. They could take back with a knight or a pawn. I guess that's pretty good. It doesn't jump out at me. Now, of course, it's not a huge advantage. White is currently up 0.6, and the engine best move is still 0.6. Next best moves are a4. Okay, so doing the pawn attack that I was thinking about, but they're suggesting start with a4 instead of b4. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so they have a4 just to kind of make that threat. And then their e takes, and then they would start to take in the center, and we would trade in the center. Huh. I don't know about that. Let's move on ahead. There we go. So that's my mistake, is pinning. So if the mistake was to pin, we already saw that the best move previously was pawn takes e5. I bet that could still very likely be the best move. Now, sometimes when the position changes a little bit, the best move from before is no longer the best move, but it could still very well be a candidate move. And in fact, probably even holds a little bit more weight now that their knight is on f6. We'd be forced to trade. If not that, then it would certainly be probably that a4 going against that, going for that trapped bishop. That was a mistake. Castle was best, so I should have castled. Which makes sense, castling early, or d takes e5. Yep, d takes e5 is the still top engine line, which gets it to a drawn position. Pretty even game at this point. Okay, and then we move on. I think opponent kind of miscalculates the trade here. They were sacrificing that bishop, not quite sure what they were hoping would happen. I bet they thought if I took my queen, maybe they were thinking they could then sack a bishop. I'd take a pawn. I'd take with a pawn, and then their queen could take my knight. I'm not sure what was going on there. Yeah, so miscalculation, and then not too long after we get to the end of the game. Okay, so I think relatively interesting game, even though it was pretty short. I think my key takeaway there is, yeah, I should have castled maybe one or two moves earlier. And when I'm looking at potentially going after that stuck bishop on the side, a pawn before the b pawn. Take care.